Welcome back. All right, power rankings. So the NHL has been doing a lot of talking about the quarter century, and I thought I could do like a quarter century type power rankings. Now, it gets difficult because like we're in 2024, 2025. I couldn't really take that into account for this. So using the standings and where everybody was from 2000, 2001, so from that season through last season, 2023, 2024, I thought let's go ahead and combine things and see who does well in the regular season, who does well in the playoffs, see the difference. And then I'm planning on doing like a series where I look at every team and how they've done over that time period. And then for those videos, I can also include where they're trending in 2024, 2025. So I'm doing a power rankings for this, and then I'll do a power rankings for the playoffs from 2001 through 2024. And again, not every team that does well during the regular season does well in the playoffs, and vice versa. Sometimes a team just kind of falls into the playoffs, and look, they're pretty good when they get there. So, with that in mind, it's 1 through 32, and also Utah will not be on the board for this or for the playoff video because they're still in their first season, right? So that's why there's only 32. Technically, I'd have to make it a 33 if I was going to include Utah because they are being treated as a different organization. So that is one thing to keep in mind and take into consideration. It also means that, yes, I will do a video looking at Arizona's team from 2000, 2001 through 2023, 2024. And yeah, so that's where those stats are at. And let's go ahead and jump in, talk about the power rankings. Now that the preamble is aside, number 32 on the list, and I don't have to say where they were last week, but I'm not surprised it's the Coyotes. The team has moved. They've moved to Utah. The team was bad. The team was bad for most of the time they were in the desert. From 01 through 2024, you had one run to a conference final and then nothing to follow that up with. And I totally understand why fans weren't necessarily clamoring for more Coyotes hockey. And there's still the debate about whether or not the NHL will go back to Arizona at some point in time. Number 31, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Columbus, and I've talked about this, Columbus has had a lot of trouble in terms of making that next step. They've never won their division. I don't have they ever had home ice advantage in the playoffs. I don't think they have. This is a team that needs something more, something that's going to spur them to better results. This year, Columbus looks like they could make the playoffs, so fingers crossed on that, but they're 31 on this board today. Number 30, and this may not seem fair because they're only in their fourth season. So with the 3 seasons I used as a sample, Seattle ends up 30th. One playoff appearance, missed the playoffs the other 2 times. They are an expansion team. They won't get as much consideration from others because look what Vegas did. But yeah, Seattle's not Vegas, and NHL GMs weren't lined up to make great deals with Seattle like they did with Vegas. So Seattle's 30th on the board. Meaning that for Vegas, I had to kind of prorate and figure all that out too. But for Seattle, I couldn't justify having them any higher than 30th on the board. Number 29, and this one's a tough one, it's Buffalo. Is there a power rankings video that I can do where Buffalo's not near the bottom? And I know too when I do the playoffs one that they're probably going to be down near the bottom again. And I feel bad because Buffalo's been bad for so very long. But there they are, 29th. When your team hasn't made the playoffs since 2011, you're not going to be very high on the board. The sad part being that prior to this extended dry spell, they were a pretty good organization. They had a Stanley Cup final appearance in 1999, and they had in 06-07 one of the best teams that nobody really talks about now. And then, of course, things just didn't get better after that. But it was 06-07, right, where they had like a fantastic season. So yeah, number 29 is Buffalo. Number 28, Edmonton. Why? Why would Edmonton be this low? That long drought without the playoffs. Long drought without the playoffs is going to lead to a team being down towards the bottom. Obviously, if I was doing this for the last 5 years, Edmonton would be up near the top. But since this is from 2000, 2001 through 2023, 2024, Edmonton is 28th on the board. Long stretch without a playoffs for them. Their playoff streak, I believe they had the longest streak without making the playoffs until Buffalo annihilated that record, and it looks like Buffalo's not done adding to that record as of yet. Number 27, not a huge surprise here in that the Islanders have had their struggles too. So the Islanders 27th on the board. This is a team that's they've had some good seasons, sure. I think when I do the playoff one, they'll probably be a little higher on that one. Just because, in recent years they've had some good luck in the playoffs and done pretty well. And I'm talking about 2020 and 2021. Not the most recent first round exits, but I think those conference final appearances, semifinal appearance in 2020 or 2021, it was a semifinal. No, 2020 was a semifinal. 2021 was back to being a conference final. Either way, I think the Islanders will do better on the playoff one. We'll see. Number 26. So with Winnipeg, I also am including Atlanta because Atlanta's history went with them to Winnipeg. It's one of those things the NHL sometimes includes history, sometimes doesn't. So including the Atlanta seasons drags Winnipeg down a bit, but Winnipeg's overall track record in the regular season, it did have its struggles in the beginning in Winnipeg as well. So Winnipeg's 26th on the board. We'll see where they are on the playoff board. Winnipeg hasn't had a lot of playoff success either, so I'll be interested to see where they land on the playoff power rankings. Have not done them yet. Number 25, Florida. And when I say haven't done them yet, it means by the time you see this, I will have done them, but at the time I'm recording this, I haven't. But yeah, Florida's 25th because they were bad for a long time too. So while they're very good now, they're a Stanley Cup champion, which means they're going to be much higher in the playoff power rankings category. For regular season power rankings, Florida's 25th. So Florida Panthers had some issues before Bill Zito got there and fixed them. And that was a big part of the reason too, I do believe, for the attendance issues they had been having as well. So that's the next row from 25 through 30. You'll see I just have 6 teams. I felt like, well, I could have 4 lines of 8, but then it goes all the way to here. And, why not shorten it up just a little bit? So we move into the next row, and at number 24, another team that had a long streak without playoffs, Toronto. So again, the system that I set up to decide where everybody is, it took me about an hour to go through, and a little over an hour, actually, it was about an hour and a half to figure out where everybody was going to be. And Toronto ends up 24th. So Toronto's had some regular season success lately, lately being the last 8 years. I did give more consideration for teams that won divisions, teams that won President's Trophies, because it's regular season power rankings. But Toronto, 24th. So not at the very bottom, not near the bottom necessarily, but not in the top 16 either. Number 23, and I was surprised by this one, even double-checked all of it, but Chicago. Chicago's run, where they get the 3 Stanley Cups, is bookended by long runs without playoffs. And so those long runs without playoffs mean that Chicago as a regular season team is 23rd. They've been without the playoffs now for over half a decade. So, yeah, isn't that weird that Chicago ends up 23rd on the board because it's such a large sample size I'm going by. So, yes, they had the 3 Stanley Cups. They did very well. When I do the playoff power rankings, they're going to be up near the top of the board. But, yeah, 23rd in terms of regular season success for the Chicago Blackhawks. Number 22, Carolina. Another team that went a long time without a playoff appearance. Wasn't it like 10 years? It was a while. So, for Carolina, they're a successful team in the regular season now. And I would think they'll continue to be a good regular season team for years to come. But there was a long dry spell before we got there, which is incorporated into this power rankings. I think the thing I'm gonna get a kick out of is when this does go live, all of the comments of, he totally hates my team because they shouldn't be there because they're really good right now. That's going to be my favorite comment since it goes all the way back to 2000, 2001, which by my demographics means a relatively decent portion of my audience either wasn't born or was not of the age to really remember the 2000-2001 season all that well. I do remember all that, but where other people have a life, I have hockey. Number 21, Minnesota. The Minnesota Wild have had some very good regular seasons. Playoff success, not so much. Although when I do the playoffs, it will include that 0-3 run to the conference final. So there's that to look forward to if you're Minnesota. But yeah, Minnesota 21st in regular season. I wasn't really all that surprised by that. They've had their ups and their downs along the way. Number 20 did surprise me a bit because Montreal. There was a time in the NHL where if you went more than a few years between Stanley Cups, Montreal fans wanted you gone. They are champions. There There's no, well, we're a good playoff team, or, oh, well, at least we went to the second round. No. It's Stanley Cup or nothing. Those times in Montreal are gone. You have a 32-team league now, so that's not really a realistic way of looking at it anyways. You've got so many good teams. But I was still surprised Montreal wasn't at least in the top 16, because in my memory banks, a lot of my favorite series have been ones that Montreal's participated in over the years. So 20th does come as a bit of a surprise to me, but that's where, with power rankings like this, I don't use opinion on any of it. I let this speak for itself. So Montreal's number 20. Number 19, the Kings. The Kings, even when they won the Stanley Cup, not necessarily great regular seasons. Good regular seasons, sure, playoff team, yep, but great regular seasons? Not really. Which might be part of the reason why I give the Kings a bit more of the benefit of the doubt when they don't have a great record than some other teams. But yeah, the Kings, 19th on the board. Yeah, it seems about accurate. They're just coming out of a rebuild. They've done multiple rebuilds over the last 25 years, so yeah. Number 18, as we move into the next row on the board, Calgary. The Flames went a few years there where during the towards the end of Iginla's time there, where they were close to the playoffs, close enough that they wouldn't admit they needed to do some sort of a rebuild. Flames fans hated that time period. The Flames, though, have had some success in the regular season, enough to keep them above all of these teams, but not quite enough to end up in the top 17. So Calgary, 18 on the board, and I don't have to talk about last week. I don't have to talk about peaks and valleys. This is a weird way for me to do the power rankings. I am so conditioned now to the way I normally do the power rankings. Number 17, Anaheim. So the Ducks, as we get to the halfway point of this board, the Ducks at 17, that feels about right because they've had times where they're a really strong contender. They're playing really, really well. And they've had some bad seasons too. And so it feels like it kind of evens out. So Anaheim at 17, yeah, that's about right, I think. You guys can let me know your thoughts. Which means that, oddly enough, none of the teams that are in my top three, my three favorites, which are Vancouver, Boston, Dallas, are in the bottom half of the board. I'm mildly surprised. Number 16, Ottawa. So they've had a long stretch now without playoffs, but the Ottawa Senators have been a very good team at times over the last 25 years. So their placement right around that midway mark, because midway is technically between 16 and 17 when you've got 32. I guess 16, well, 16 is exactly half. So they're half. They're at the half. They're mid. There you go. It's terrible. When did mid become awful? When like bad is bad. Mid is still good. It's not awful. It's just weird to me that we use that as an insult now. The guy's mid. So he's good. He's not necessarily great. I don't know why that became an insult. So Ottawa, right in the middle there. And once again, I could totally get it. If we took out the last 5 years, they'd be a lot higher on the board. But that's not really how this works. Number 15, Philly. So early in this millennium, Philly had some good runs. And of course, 2010, they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Though that was a team that wasn't necessarily great. They weren't top 16 in the league that year. They were in the East, so the playoff line was a little bit lower in terms of points than it was in the West, and they got in. And so Philadelphia took advantage of that, and they're due for something. The next time Philadelphia makes the playoffs, I'm probably going to pick them in the first round, whoever they're against, because it feels like Philadelphia is long overdue for some kind of a long, crazy run in the playoffs. But, again, Philadelphia has to make the playoffs before that can take place. Number 14, New Jersey. Yep, the Devils are above the halfway mark. Despite some issues they've had since that 2012 run to the final where they missed the playoffs for a long while there. Made the playoffs in 2019 and then went back to missing the playoffs again. But New Jersey still ends up above the halfway mark. They're at 14. And one thing when I do a power rankings like this is that I'll write them all down. I'll look at them and I'll think, does that make sense? And if it doesn't, I'll go back and try recalculating and figuring it out. But for most of these, almost all of these, I look at them and I go, yeah. And I think for New Jersey, that makes some sense. Number 13, another team that would have been much, much higher if we didn't include the last 5 years. San Jose. San Jose, if you want to have an argument with somebody, you can ask, what's the best team that hasn't won a Stanley Cup? And you're going to get arguments for San Jose and Vancouver, I think, the most. You're going to probably get some arguments for Nashville. Um, you're going to get arguments for Winnipeg with what they have now. But there are some really good teams that San Jose had, especially in the 2000s and early 2010s, that just didn't get there. In 2016, they got all the way to the final, and of course, they lost against the Pittsburgh Penguins. The first Stanley Cup final, where I was, talking about hockey and doing hockey videos. Though that was before I'd really fully gone in as the hockey guy at that point. But yeah, the San Jose run to the final was fun to cover. So we're up to the top two rows. And when we get to number 12, it is the Canucks. They won back-to-back President's Trophies. They had very good regular seasons for a while there. They did have a great regular season last year as well. So that definitely buoys them up to number 12 on the chart. I have a feeling that the playoffs, though they did have that run to the 2011 Stanley Cup final, might see Vancouver being lower. And I'm saying might because I haven't done the numbers on that yet. But Vancouver is frustrating to follow. Frustrating to cheer for. They're a frustrating franchise. But that's how you can tell you're a fan, is when you get frustrated. You don't really even think about not being a fan anymore. You kind of turn that fandom. You don't turn the fandom down. You guys know what I mean? Like, you don't get as emotionally invested. This year with the Canucks, I'm not as emotionally invested because I just don't feel like it's there. What you're looking for with a contender is not there. I really hope they're higher up, though, next time I do. 25 years from now, the next time I do this, be nice if they were higher up. It'd also be nice to be able to do this 25 years from now, wouldn't it? Number 11, St. Louis. The Blues have been a pretty good regular season team. And though they're threatening to miss the playoffs for the third straight season this year, although general manager Armstrong is trying to fix that, today is the day where it's broken that Brandon Saad is going to mutually part ways with his contract with St. Louis, which could go one of two ways. Either Saad signs somewhere else and he bombs out, or Saad signs somewhere else, plays really well, and the Blues have egg on their face. But either way, the St. Louis Blues, number 11 on the board, and missing the playoffs the last 2 years might very well have cost them 10th place. 10th place goes to Nashville. So what's interesting here too is west, 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 east, 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 west, 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 east, west, east. See, that's the way it should be, is kind of alternating. But I noticed, wow, we've got 4 Western teams in a row, and Nashville's top 10. I'm old enough to remember when they went out and got Peter Forsberg, and there was a lot of buzz about them at that point. They've won a President's Trophy. They had that run all the way to the Stanley Cup final, despite being the lowest seed going into those playoffs. They went on a nice Cinderella run there, courtesy of Pekka Rinne, who is just too good right now. Number 9 on the board, Tampa. One thing with Tampa is they're very good. When Tampa Bay rebuilds, it's usually quick, and they're usually terrible for a couple years there, but they'll bring their way. They'll fight their way back into the playoffs not too long after. And it will be interesting to see if Tampa Bay continues to slide towards the playoff line, especially if they fall below the playoff line. Do we see them do it again, where they go into one of those quickie rebuilds, which they did around Stamkos, and it worked out pretty well for them there. The Tampa Bay Lightning are in an interesting spot, but they've generally been a pretty good team in the regular season. Number 8. About time I got to this. It's Dallas. I'm wearing Dallas. Dallas has been good. The interesting thing with Dallas is that they do miss the playoffs, I think, a little more often than people might consider, because Dallas doesn't get a lot of attention around the National Hockey League. It's one of the reasons that I started covering all 32 teams, was because I noticed if I was looking up stuff on Dallas, there was very, very little on Dallas. And I felt like that wasn't great. I was like, man, as a Dallas fan, this is kind of depressing. So Dallas at number 8, they've had some excellent regular seasons since we're going back as far as when they wore this jersey. I thought, yeah, I'll wear that jersey. And number 8, yeah, not too shabby. Number 7, the last team not to be in the top row, because in this one, the top row is top 6, and that's the New York Rangers. The Rangers have had some very good regular seasons. When they did their retool, it was very quick. Now people look at that and go, but was it too quick? Did they not build right? You guys can have that debate if you want. I think the New York Rangers, while they're below the playoff line at the time I'm recording this, the reason I'm saying at the time I'm recording this is because I think there's still potential there for them to get above the playoff line. I don't know if it's going to happen before the break, but there's still that potential. So we get into the top row, and these top 6 teams, once again, when I was, figuring this out, I did have a points total that was assigned, but I also, I had a couple other numbers that I was using, and I was trying to factor all of it in and go, okay, this team should be here and here and here. So there's a little bit of opinion that's in there, but I generally went with what the numbers told me. Number 6 is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Penguins have been very good during the regular season. Having Crosby and Malkin's definitely helped. 3 Stanley Cups won over this time, so they will be in the top row for the Stanley Cup power rankings as well. But for these power rankings, they are number 6. Number 5 on the board is Colorado. The Avs had some down years that prevented them from being higher than 5th, but I think 5th works for Colorado. They've won the division a few times. They've been very good. President's Trophy in there too, I do believe. So I felt like with Colorado, 5th place, best spot for them, and the numbers told me that as well. So that's where Colorado is. Number 4, Detroit. It is insane that Detroit's been out of the playoffs for as long as they have, and they're still 4th because of President's Trophy wins, division wins, and playoffs, and everything they were able to do prior to this long dry spell. They still end up 4th on the board. So, yeah, from 2001 through until, 2016? Very good team. The last few years they made the playoffs there. Yes, Ken Holland was doing what he could to try to keep them playoff bound rather than committing to some form of a rebuild. But Detroit still top 4. I think that's pretty impressive. And when we do the Stanley Cup rankings, I don't think Detroit's going to drop very much. One thing I've always thought about doing too is a power rankings for the National Hockey League from its inception until now. When I figure out a way to do that, that's not going to take me like years to figure out. I have no problem with that. But at this point in time, I'm just doing from 2000, 2001 through 2023, 2024. Maybe this summer I'll do something like that. Vegas is number 3. The Vegas Golden Knights, they didn't get as many points because they've only been around for 7 years. So basically I just took their points and tripled them. And I took into account things like they win the Stanley Cup. They've had really good records as well. They've been able to win their division. And they were right up there for the President's Trophy. They didn't win it that one year, but they had excellent numbers. So it all balances out to, for me, Vegas being 3rd. They've only missed the playoffs once in their existence. They're not going to miss the playoffs this year either. So, yeah, to me, Vegas ends up 3rd, which means we got 2 and 1 on the board. Number 2 is Washington. Washington, excellent regular season team, and thank God they won the Stanley Cup in 2018, because if they hadn't, I don't think they would have won the Cup in 19, in 20, or 2021. So we would be talking about this great Washington team that never won anything. And all the Ovechkin talk about him getting to Gretzky's record and passing Gretzky, there would definitely be somebody raising their hand and go, yeah, but he never won a Stanley Cup. So he's not really one of the greats, because he never won the greats always win the Stanley Cups. That's why Marcel Dion's not really truly a great player, because he never won the big one. I think he's been the problem in Washington. I think he just has too many goals is the problem. I think he's just very selfish. He's a very selfish player. That's the kind of thing that I would expect if Washington hadn't won that Stanley Cup in 2018, which they did. They haven't won around since then, but they did win that Stanley Cup. Number 1 on the board is Boston. I am not surprised that Boston is the best regular season team over the last 25 years approximately, because Boston's excellent during the regular season. This is why I don't take basically anything for granted when it comes to Boston. They're having a great regular season. I enjoy it. I've started to enjoy their games lately. They got killed by Buffalo 7-2 last night. I didn't enjoy that from a Boston perspective. I was happy for Buffalo. They got to go on a run, though. But for Boston, yeah, when they win during the regular season, I enjoy it. But I expect pain in the playoffs. They did win a Stanley Cup in 2011. Yep, over the team the only team that I root for more than Boston. The only team that could make me upset when they win is if they beat Vancouver in the final, which they did. So the hockey gods hate me. They really do. Anyways, Boston's number 1 in the regular season. I do not expect them to be number 1 when it gets to the postseason power rankings. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And my plan is to look at, what teams have done over the last 25 years, that kind of thing. And once I've got all these power rankings done, they will be included in those videos as well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. If you haven't already hit like and subscribe, please do. I will talk to you again soon.